Namaskar and good afternoon, everybody. I welcome you all to the first panel session titled Ecological Swaraj Reclaiming Indian Wisdom for a Sustainable Future. Our moderator for this discussion is Professor Shilpa Satish. Professor Shilpa Satish is a faculty member at Indian Institute of Management, Kozhikode. She holds a PhD in sociology from University of South Florida. Joining us here on the panel is Mr. S. Gopikrishna Warrior. May I request Professor Priya Nair Rajiv to please present them with a ponada. Mr. S. Gopikrishna Warrior is an environmental journalist based in Thrissur, Kerala, and currently serves as editorial director of Mongabe, India. Next, we have Mr. Sridhar Radhakrishnan. Mr. Sridhar Radhakrishnan is an environmentalist, policy analyst, and advocate for ecological democracy with over 3 decades of work in agroecology, food sovereignty, and climate action. Next, we have Professor John Kurian. Professor John Kurian is a development practitioner whose 5-decade career bridges livelihoods, rural organizations, and environmental concerns. Next, we have Ms. Shruti P.K. Ms. Shruti P.K. is a committed social worker and resident of Aralam Farm in Kannur, Kerala. As a member of the Aralam Task Force, she actively engages in community-based initiatives addressing human-wildlife conflict in the region. I now request Professor Satish and the panelists to begin the discussion.
Thank you so much. A warm welcome to everyone to the panel. I'm really delighted to be here today, all the more because of the topic that we have for discussion here. So would want to set the tone for the panel and the discussion in 1 minute. So we're currently dealing with the Anthropocene. We are actually recognizing how human beings and our actions are contributing to a planetary crisis. And climate change and climate threat is no longer a distant future threat. We are experiencing it every day in the form of catastrophic extreme weather events and hostile environment. And unfortunately, people at the lower rungs of the social ladder are one of the most affected groups, especially precarious workers in the informal economy and women, despite contributing the minimal to making the crisis actually happen. So it is in this larger context that we would want to talk about ecological Swaraj and try and understand how we can draw from traditional wisdom and knowledge of communities that have actually established a harmonious relationship with their surroundings and also nurture this concept of community common pool resources. So without much delay, and we only have an hour left with us, and I don't want to take any time from the esteemed panelists that we have. We have 4 eminent personalities who have worked extensively on exploring the relationship between human beings and the environment from a social justice standpoint. And in doing this, our conference theme, Lessons from Invisible India, and I think we are trying to talk about environmental wisdom in the form of environmental action from communities who are largely sort of invisible from the mainstream discourse surrounding what environmentalism means. So I invite all of you for an hour of reflection and active interaction with the panelists. So after the first set of questions, we'll open the panel for questions from the audience. So I'll just start with an opening question, if that's okay. So in hoping, the discussion, we are also hoping that the term ecological Swaraj, right? What does it really mean? Is it just a call for decentralization or a rather radical call for reimagining environmental justice based on autonomy, dignity, and collective resource ownership? So I would request all of you to briefly reflect about your experience working in the different realms from which you are coming. And if I may ask, I'll ask a question specifically addressed at each of you, and you can respond. The rest of it, we can, of course, take it as a collective discussion. So my first question is to Professor John Kurian. So you have a long standing career trying to explore the way in which small-scale fish workers, they have shaped or played an active role in coastal governance. Given the current climate policies, development discourse, and blue economy narratives, how do we think we can reclaim our commons, environmental commons or climate commons, both materially and conceptually, as spaces of ecological stewardship and a site where everyday labor actually happens with dignity.
Thank you, Shilpa. Because of the time constraints, I would have liked to talk extempore, but I've also written it down. So let me just read out and look at you and answer your question. Okay. So, of course, thank you very much for inviting me to this international conclave on globalizing Indian thought. At the very outset, I want to clarify that for me, the most vital and globally relevant thought emerging from India is not a singular, monolithic, majoritarian, top-down philosophy. It is a pluralistic, democratic, living wisdom born from the hands and the daily labor of India's ecosystem people, those who relate directly with nature. These are thoughts deeply encoded in the practice of fishers, of weavers, of farmers, potters, pastoralists. It is a wisdom that is inherently sustainable, democratic, and inclusive. So my work with small-scale fishers around the world started in Kerala more than half a century ago. And what it has taught me is that this wisdom, which is born at the margins, holds the key to a future of what we term as ecological Swaraj, which to me is a genuine sovereignty over our lives and our ecosystems. So today I want to focus on how we reclaim the aquatic coastal commons, both materially and conceptually, as spaces of ecological stewardship and labor dignity. The first point is that there is a threat, and the threat is this blue economy. Blue economy as a new form of enclosure. First, this narrative, while it often is wrapped in the language of sustainability, frequently functions as a new wave of enclosure. It creates what we may call distorted commons. That is where one experiences the tragedy of enclosures, and with oceans being managed for the sake of capital and throughput and not for people or ecology. So this is not an abstract concept. It manifests as the material and the conceptual marginalization of small-scale and often artisanal fishers. Their fishing grounds are carved up for development, while their sophisticated knowledge, a science of what I consider to be abductive reasoning, honed over generations, is dismissed as being anecdotal. This is an illicit grab of our coastal commons, dispossessing communities of their rights and severing the unique bond between their culture and the sea. The promise of growth masks a reality of ecological overfishing and the loss of labor dignity. And what is the alternative? The alternative, in my understanding, is blue justice and convivial knowledge. So this is about reclaiming the commons, and this requires a framework of ecological Swaraj and blue justice. So we shift from a blue economy to a blue justice framework. This means putting the social, cultural, and human rights of small-scale fishers at the very center of ocean governance. And this is not a single ancient text, but 1,000 living oral libraries about the practices of diverse communities along the coastlines, communities of all faiths and backgrounds. This knowledge system is a model of conviviality where technology, like a fishing net or a sail, enhances human autonomy and fosters community. It is a system that is ecological, evolutionary, and governed by customary institutions to ensure equality and sustainability. And reclaiming the conceptual commons means validating this pluralistic subaltern knowledge as a legitimate and essential foundation for technology development and policy. And what about the action? This is about rights, it's about co-creation, it is about the sovereignty of knowledge. And we move to legally empower the commons and foster co-creation. We need governance models that recognize and protect commons and are right-based governance, ecological governance. And this provides a legal framework to protect the material commons from enclosure and empowers communities to be the stewards of that. Furthermore, policy and science must not override local knowledge, but engage with it. We must foster a co-evolution of experiential knowledge with formal science. I just want to point out one success story of the co-design of a plywood vallam boat, which is now so widespread in South India. And the innovation and the diffusion of this, I was very closely associated with. It started in a little village in Kanyakumari called Muttam, and it has spread all over South India. If you go to the beach now, that's what you will see. It has replaced all the other traditional boat designs because of the non-availability of the material for those traditional designs. And it shows that the best solutions arise from dialogue and not from technological or policy diktat, which has been the norm in India for 60, 70 years. So in conclusion, if we are to truly globalize Indian thought, and let it be this thought, a thought that is humble, that is learned from the hands that wield the fisher's net, the weaver's loom, and the farmer's plow. Let it be the conviction that the true Sanskriti of a sustainable future lies not in the static hegemony of one worldview, but in the dignified, dynamic, and grounded wisdom of those who live and labor in concert with nature. Therefore, let us champion a vision of ecological Swaraj that is rooted unequivocally in the sovereignty of diverse knowledge systems and not in the supremacy of any single homogenized vision. This, the wisdom of the hands, is the Indian wisdom that the world desperately needs today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Kurian. And this move towards blue justice is something we hope to hear from you more in the form of the public engagement that you do in the form of very accessible writing. My next question is to Mr. Gopinath Varyar. So you currently serve as the editor-director of Monga Bay India. And I'd like to ask, building on to what Professor Kurian was saying, a lot of environmental challenges are actually faced by communities in the lower rungs of society. So what are some of the challenges or some of the practices that you incorporate as editor when you report on grassroots environmental struggles or communities who are facing environmental issues across the country? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good morning and good afternoon. Thank you for this invitation. We journalists are storytellers. For us, our life is about telling a story. And how do we tell a story of something that is complex, something that is not amenable to storytelling? How do we turn it into a story? I think that's what we try to do all the time. And so with stories of the marginalized. And when we talk about marginalized in journalism, we are not talking of marginalized in some of the accepted frameworks, like the frame of caste or frame of class or frame of, economic. We are talking of marginalized. I mean, people who are marginalized, people who are at the periphery of a scheme of things. Now, how do you bring those stories, those voices back into the mainstream? Now, historically, we know in the past nearly 4 decades, 3.5 decades, some of the issues which were issues of the people, as you mentioned, have gone into the periphery of national consciousness. In 1990, when journalists covered the Farquhar movement of Narmada, the Farquhar movement of the Narmada agitation, the entire nation sort of followed the news coverage. But that was not the scene by late 1990s. And today, something like Polavaram is as big a dam as Sardar Sarovar, with as much as displacement issues, but nobody talks about it. Now, that change has happened because of 3 primary reasons. One, post-economic liberalization, where, the so much of focus went to urban middle class, people like us, urban middle class. Only issues which are of importance to us, we talk about. Issues that are not important, that are away from us, we do not talk about. That's just one reason. There are 2 other reasons. One other reason is the very strident positions that the environmental movements, social movements have taken. The unwillingness to engage, the unwillingness to say, we don't agree with, there are 10 issues, let's see where we agree, we can agree in 3, and then let's discuss about the remaining 6. That does not happen, and that's why these issues have gone out of. And the third reason, which is very, very important from my point of view, from the storytelling point of view, is that the stories have remained the same. So there's a fatigue with these stories. You do not want to hear these stories. And that's the reason that the issues such as what Professor Kurian said, these are issues that have gone into the periphery. Now, how, as an editor, how do I try and bring these issues back so I edit a publication called Mongo Bay India. If you haven't seen it, please have a look. You can see it on your mobile, india.mongobay.com. And how do we bring, it's an environment and conservation publication. So one of the ways which we bring is, how do you get the stories from the grassroots? So basically issues like women, conserving forests in Odisha, or stories like how poachers turned into conservators in the Manas National Park, stories like that. How do you bring those stories into the mainstream? Then the other one is bringing out problems of the marginalized. So, for instance, we do not think about it. All of us love Swiggy and Zomato to deliver within 15 minutes. But we do not sort of think about what the gig workers go through when it's raining outside or there's a heat wave. They do not have the luxury like us to stay indoors, or people who are outside, who are forced to be outside. So running stories like that, bringing their voices. For instance, one of my young colleagues did a story on how she followed the life of one auto driver in Delhi who went through a serious heat stroke in 1 year. And she followed him through the hospital. And next year we followed the same person. And we realized that person was, after the heat stroke, he was not good enough to work any longer in Delhi. He went back to the village, and he obviously didn't have the same earnings. But more than that, he had such strong impacts from that heat stroke that he was partially debilitated. Now, these are the stories which do not find mentions, but these are direct stories which how climate change affect the marginalized, So they run stories like this, or transgenders whom you see on the street. I mean, for them coming out is very important, or take something like Cubbon Park in Bangalore, where in its wisdom, the park authorities said, we are going to close Cubbon Park in the afternoon hours. Now, Cubbon Park was the last refuge for people who were on the roads to come during the heat of summer. And we did a story, and then, the authorities changed that rule, So, and then bringing environmental economics, the economics of what is the economic benefit of keeping some of these environmental resources going, bringing those stories, and stories like wetland champions, looking at ordinary people who are essentially, some of them are like, an ATM security guard, how he has conserved a wetland, taking those stories. And that story had, that entire series of 25 stories had an impact which we didn't expect to happen. Because the environment minister, Union Environment Minister, and we are not doing journalism so that it gets noticed by the government. The Union Environment Minister saw this series, and he invited this group of people and felicitated them. So it's almost like getting a Padma Award, for this group of people. So we've had that kind of, hopefully somewhere some kind of policy discussions come into it. So these are the kind of stories we have been doing, and also very important, trying to get the voices of the grassroots to write the stories. So we have two running collaborations, one with a publication called Baimanus in Maharashtra, a Marathi publication, which does grassroots stories. They have grassroots reporters getting their stories on climate change and natural resources onto Mongabay India platform, and in the process also strengthening the reporting skills of the grassroots reporter. And more recently, another collaboration with something called Keystone Foundation in the Nilgiris, which works with indigenous women in the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, so 3 states involved, and getting them to do their stories, both in Mongabay, India, and also their publication. So these are the ways in which the why we have reached this state and how we are trying to deal with it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for elaborately explaining, sir. And we look forward to checking some of these stories out, including the Cubbon Park one. My next question is to Mr. Sridhar Radhakrishnan. So you have been working with TAPCO, Tirunelli Agri-Producers Company, and also previously as part of the Save Our Rice campaign associating with Tunnel. So this foreground seed sovereignty and agroecology. So my question is, how do these interventions provide an alternative to growth-centric models of agrarian development and growth, especially considering climate change, climate resilience, and food sovereignty, if you put these ideas into the foreground? Thank you.
Okay. First of all, let me apologize to this question itself, because I'm more of a generalist. And with no big choice, I had to traverse into so many things across the environment sector, which means that I do quite some work on environment, climate change, agriculture, industrial pollution, both fighting and correcting things, and also doing some quote-unquote Nirman work. But before I start that, I would also I was just thinking, and there's a very quick thought that came to me. This whole question of Indian thought. So I was wondering about 18% of the hall is full. So I was wondering whether the 82% has gone for foreign thoughts. And this is just partly a joke, because most of our students are actually going out, in spite of the fact that we have some superb institutions like IIM here. Such an exodus of kids going out of the country. Is it something to do with the way that we are designing our nation? It's something I'll just leave for right now, because it's also in some sense part of my thought processes. So let me not start with your question, but I'll come to that. In the flow, I'll come to it. So I want to, start with, in this conversation, start with my own, what tryst with some of these issues that we have dealt with. 15 kilometers from here, exactly 15 kilometers from here, 28 minutes by drive, there is a place called Mavur Gwalior Rayons, and there was a factory called Gwalior Rayons Factory. In the 1990s and 2000s, this was the first struggle I was personally involved in. It was a factory built by the Birlas, and obviously there was a left government at that time, and the left government invited the capitalist factory to come and establish in Kerala, dichotomic thinking, but nevertheless. And then it started polluting the day one. And then for 40, 50 years, it kept on running on various pretexts, protests, fights, people struggling. There were even Panchayat members who went in and said, I'll bomb the factory. 2 years back, the Panchayat president passed away, who fought it. It was one of the first environmental struggles in Kerala, was the Mavur Gwalior Rayons factory struggle. There's a river flowing by called the Chalier, one of the larger rivers in Kerala, completely polluted. My estimates at that time, the study that I did, 30,000 fishermen community, inland fisher community living there had lost their livelihoods. I went up to the mountains in Wayanad, which is again about 50 kilometers from here, and talked to the tribal community, the bamboo people and all that, and I found that about 3 lakh, and this is government data, 3 lakh livelihoods were lost because bamboo extracted from the forests were all given to the factory to produce staple fiber, rayon, and then the Grasim since 1963, the big slogan that was there for a very long time. I wrote a book called Grasim since 1963, The Burden on Our Heads. The factory closed in 2000 because we didn't have enough bamboo to give. But what I'm trying to point out in this story, and I'll rush through the rest of it because I just wanted to take 2 stories to actually highlight what we're talking about. I would call it either the politics of invisibility or perhaps the invisible side of growth. And so growth, whether it be in the 1900s or the 1800s or the 2000s or tomorrow, has invisible sides. And those invisible sides are always the marginalized communities, the women, the children, whether you are bombing in Palestine or you are going to take over land in Andaman and Nicobar for development, the invisible side will be there. And we will conveniently not look at the invisible side, whichever government. So this is not about this government or that government. It's not the politics of that at all, not the color of the flag. My big second struggle in my life, and this is like, again, I'm talking out of lived experiences, was the endosulfan spraying issue about 189 kilometers from here, just 189 kilometers, travel to the north. A whole district where the plantations were spread got sprayed with endosulfan for 20 years. Every household had deformed children. The government was continuously in denial because the industry was continuously in denial. Nobody wanted to speak about it, and then the data spoke. The data spoke, the bloodstreams spoke. People who were tested in the blood found endosulfan in there, and so the deformities. To me, the struggles that people were going through in all these places, and hundreds and thousands of places across the country, became personal, became intensely personal, to the state that one lost sleep, and the struggle had a different meaning. For me, ecological Swaraj is a concept which is far off, somewhere out there, and you don't achieve it by all the positive thinkings that we are taught, our students are taught. We are all taught that. Day in, day out, televisions, media, PR, everybody tells us, think positively. The Indian thought, now when translated to current times, also says, think positively. But I have not seen change happening, bloodstreams cleaning up out of the pesticides by just thinking positively. Sangharsh was internalized into this. This is there. whether it be a tribal community struggling to keep a mining industry out of their settlements, it is Sankarsh. And so I went on from there to the Elur-Adayar industrial area, the huge toxics issues, persistent organic pollutants, which is a global fight. And today globally we are beginning to ban them, genetically modified crops, pesticides, wetlands destruction. Kerala has lost 80% of its paddy wetlands, 80%. And ultimately, we've reached a point where this has all become a global threat. All of them has accumulated, gradually joining in together to what is called the climate crisis. Some negate it. We continue to fight on it. Now I'll come to the next question of, okay, we have been trying to run on this whole Sankarsh thing. But it's also very true that struggle without creation breeds fatigue. So at some point, we all get fatigued. And then creation also without the struggle, creation itself without the struggle, most of the time breeds compromise, if you look at it in its depth. Our transformations, as you also introduced it, was then about talking about, okay, from the endosulfan struggle, what do you study? What do you want to do? We realized that if we have to stop polluting people, land, water, air, you have to talk about natural farming, organic farming, our own control over seeds. If you want to stop genetically modified seeds, let's talk about our seeds. So slowly the transition started for us, and that's where the Save Our Rice campaign, it was a huge national campaign we ran for 14 years. And I was one of the coordinators, or whether it be the zero waste campaign, fighting the incinerators and the burning of waste and the killing of the resources, or the larger alliance that I am part of, which is the Sustainable and Holistic Agriculture, or the Tirunelli Agri-Producer Company that we started, and I am part of running it in Wayanad. Today in Malayalam Manorama, there is a big story on it, a complete feature on it. Fortunately, right today it happened. Or the natural and organic farming, which was thrown out into the rubbish for years together, and now we are having the government stand up and say that the only way forward is to go into organic and natural farming. Why? Because transitions work. And it works not in monolithic structures, it works in cooperation. And we also found that it is not idealism. Cooperation is viable economics, if you want to look at it from management point of view or economic point of view. So farmers controlling seeds, their price, their technology, all of it was what we did. And from this Sankarsh, through this transition, we went into what I would love to call Nirman. And these are sides of the same coin. And cooperation, what does cooperation mean? And today when you say cooperation, we are all immediately talking about cooperatives, or we are immediately talking about bringing people together. No. It is fundamental to ecological, Swaraj. It's fundamental to economic Swaraj. It's also fundamental to social Swaraj. Go anywhere in the country and don't negate it. Don't shake your head and say that it's not there. Go anywhere into your country, you will see that all these things, minute things to maximus things, big ones, caste is fundamental. We are not getting out of it. We are more and more entrenching it. We are more and more injecting caste and religion and divisiveness right into the blood of all of us. And we are still not thinking that we are, at the end of the day, human beings, same kind of bloodstream in the whole world. And we are all faced with the same crisis. You like it or not, we'll be hit by a cyclone. So, for me, and I'll wind up the starting thing. Yeah, I'll wind up the starting thing. So what's the challenge for us? So when I'm speaking here, I'm not asking that we all go back. Every time when we talk like this, okay, Sridhar is passionately talked, he's in it, all in it, we can talk. It's not a passionate thing. It's not, I'm not even talking about going back. Ecological Swaraj for me, and that is a question that you wanted to know through this, whether it be through seed sovereignty or whether it be through control over our own technologies, our own price, our data sets are coming, our big digital information thing is coming, but are we in control of it? So for me, it's about reimagining our intelligence. And if in that reimagining intelligence process, Indian thought has a big role to play, we do have a big role to play, obviously. All these struggles are not foreign struggles, as it is usually made out to be. It stems from the ground. When I go and look at Kasaragod, for instance, no foreign came and fought there. The mothers, the tribals, the workers in that community, they came and fought it. Everywhere it has been that. Don't brand us and throw us out. Look at it as something that is stemming from all of us, from the divisiveness. So for us, reclaiming intelligence of the balance of the restraint, it's of cooperation, it is about survival with dignity, and hence, maybe as a warning, and I'm finishing, maybe as a warning, or let's say a challenge, and I'm sure that whoever remains here are management students or management teachers. For me, who've traveled across this country, seen what's happening with industries, and all this quote-unquote growth and development scenario, and reflecting it on the larger global challenge of environment, ecosystems, biodiversity, and climate change, I will very clearly make one statement today. We do not need managers of extraction. It's a period statement. We do not anymore need managers of extraction. We need architects of regeneration. If you are ready for it, you are there. If you're not ready for it, you are a fossil. We will not need you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, and sorry for making you wait, Shruti. I kept Shruti's presentation towards the end because she'll be speaking in Malayalam, and I'll try best to translate it as and when she speaks. Shruti is an indigenous women leader coming from Arlam region in Kerala. So I'm going to ask the question in Malayalam, but later on I'll translate. Shruti, എൻ്റെ ചോദ്യം ഇതാണ്. ആർലം എന്നുള്ള മേഖലയിൽ കുറച്ച് കാലമായിട്ട് താമസിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. അതൊരു കാടരികിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു ഏരിയയാണ്. അവിടെ ശ്രുതിയുടെ കമ്മ്യൂണിറ്റിയും നേരിടുന്ന പ്രധാന പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ നമ്മുടെ ഒരു ദൈനംദിന ജീവിതത്തിനെ ബാധിക്കുന്ന രീതിയിൽ പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് പരിസ്ഥിതിയുമായിട്ടും മൃഗങ്ങളുമായിട്ടും ഒക്കെ നേരിടുന്ന പ്രശ്നങ്ങളുടെ ഒരു ചുരുക്കം നമുക്ക് വേണ്ടി പറഞ്ഞു തരുമോ? ഒരൊറ്റ സെക്കൻഡ്. I've just asked her. She lives in a forest fringe area called Arlam. It's a resettlement area in Kerala. So it's the largest tribal resettlement program that happened in Kerala. However, the community is resettled into a thickly dense forest fringe area. So one of the major issues that they always face is human-wildlife conflict. So I'm asking Shruti to explain the everyday struggles that community in the forest fringe area in Arlam go through. Over to you, Shruti.
നമസ്കാരം, എൻ്റെ പേര് ശ്രുതി. മേഡം ഇപ്പം പരിചയപ്പെടുത്തിയല്ലോ. ഞാൻ കണ്ണൂർ ജില്ലയിൽ ആറളം ഫാമിൽ നിന്നാണ് വരുന്നത്. കേരള ഹൈക്കോടതി നിയമിച്ച ടാസ്ക് ഫോഴ്സ് വളണ്ടിയറായിട്ട് പ്രവർത്തിച്ചു വരുന്നു. ഏഷ്യയിലെ തന്നെ ഏറ്റവും വലിയ ട്രൈബൽ റീസെറ്റിൽമെൻറ്റ് ഏരിയയാണ് ആറളം ഫാം. കേരളത്തിലെ ആദിവാസി വിഭാഗത്തിൽപ്പെട്ട കുടുംബങ്ങൾക്ക് സ്വന്തമായി ഭൂമിയോ സ്ഥലമോ മറ്റടിസ്ഥാന സൗകര്യങ്ങളോ ഇല്ലാതിരുന്നപ്പോൾ പല രാഷ്ട്രീയ പാർട്ടികളുടെയും പിൻബലത്തിൽ ആദിവാസി കുടുംബങ്ങൾ കുടിൽ കെട്ടിയും മുത്തങ്ങ സമരം പോലെയുള്ള സമരങ്ങൾ നടത്തിയും കേരള സർക്കാരിൽ നിന്ന് വാങ്ങിയെടുത്ത ഭൂമിയാണ് ആറളം ഫാം റീസെറ്റിൽമെൻറ്റ് ഏരിയ. കേരള സർക്കാർ കേന്ദ്ര സർക്കാരിനോട് 7000 ഏക്കർ ഭൂമി വാങ്ങുകയും അതിൽ 3500 ഏക്കർ ഭൂമി പാവപ്പെട്ട കുടുംബങ്ങൾക്ക് പതിച്ചു നൽകുകയും 3500 ഏക്കർ ഭൂമി ഫാമിംഗ് കോർപ്പറേഷനുമായി കൈമാറി. എന്നാൽ അവിടെയാണ് ഞങ്ങളുടെ പ്രശ്നം ആരംഭിച്ചത്. ഈ ഭൂമി വനത്തിനോട് ചേർന്നുള്ളൊരു ഭൂമിയായിരുന്നു. 3500 ഏക്കർ ഭൂമി പാവങ്ങൾക്ക് പതിച്ചു നൽകിയത് വനത്തിനോട് ചേർന്നുള്ള ഭൂമിയും അതിന് മറുഭാഗമാണ് കൃഷി ഫാമിങ്ങിനുമായി തിരഞ്ഞെടുത്തത്. അതുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെ വനത്തിൽ നിന്നിറങ്ങുന്ന വന്യമൃഗങ്ങൾ ഞങ്ങളുടെ നെറ്റിയിൽ ചവിട്ടി കൃഷി ഫാമിലേക്ക് തീറ്റ തേടി ഇറങ്ങിത്തുടങ്ങി. ഇപ്പോൾ ഞങ്ങളുടെ അതായത് TRDM മേഖലയിൽ 80-ലധികം ആനകളുണ്ടെന്നാണ് കണക്കിൽ പറയുന്നത്. 3500 ഏക്കർ ഭൂമി പതിച്ചു നൽകിയെങ്കിലും കുടുംബങ്ങൾക്ക് പതിച്ചു നൽകിയെങ്കിലും അതിൽ പകുതിയിലധികം കുടുംബങ്ങളും അവിടെ താമസമില്ല. അതുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെ ഇവിടെയെല്ലാം വനത്തിന് തുല്യമായ കാട് കയറിയ അവസ്ഥയാണ്. വനത്തിൽ നിന്നിറങ്ങുന്ന വന്യമൃഗങ്ങൾക്ക് തിരിച്ച് കാട്ടിൽ കയറേണ്ട അവസ്ഥയില്ല. കാരണം ഓൾറെഡി കാട്, വനത്തിനേക്കാളും നല്ല കാട്, ഭക്ഷണത്തിന് ഭക്ഷണം, വെള്ളത്തിന് വെള്ളം, അതുപോലെ തന്നെ പകൽ സമയങ്ങളിൽ തമ്പടിക്കാനുള്ള വനങ്ങളും ഈ TRDM മേഖലയിലുണ്ട്. പുറത്തു നിന്ന് നോക്കിക്കാണുന്നവർക്ക് ആറളം ഫാം വളരെ മനോഹരവും അതുപോലെ വികസിതവുമായൊരു മേഖലയാണ്. എന്നാൽ മതിയായ അടിസ്ഥാന സൗകര്യങ്ങൾ ഒന്നും തന്നെ അവിടെയില്ല. എന്തിനേറെ പറയണം, വന്യമൃഗങ്ങളുടെ മലമൂത്ര വിസർജനം നടത്തുന്ന വെള്ളക്കെട്ടുകളാണ് അവിടെയുള്ള പല കുടുംബങ്ങൾക്കും കുടിവെള്ളത്തിന് ആശ്രയം. സുഖമില്ലാതെയായാൽ രോഗികളെ കസേരകളിൽ ചുമന്ന് കിലോമീറ്ററുകളോളം നടന്നാണ് വാഹനയോഗ്യമായ റോഡുകളിൽ എത്തിച്ചേരാൻ. 2006 പട്ടയ വിതരണം നടത്തി നാളിതുവരെ 15-ൽ പരം ആളുകൾ വന്യമൃഗങ്ങളാൽ കൊല ചെയ്യപ്പെട്ടു. പരിക്ക് പറ്റിയവർ അതിലേറെ. ഈ കഴിഞ്ഞ 2 ദിവസം മുൻപ് ഒരാളെ ആനയെ ഓടിച്ചു. എന്നിട്ടും മതിയായ സുരക്ഷാ സംവിധാനങ്ങൾ ഇവിടെയില്ല. ആനകൾക്ക് പുറമെ കുരങ്ങ് കൂടി ഇപ്പോൾ രംഗത്തെത്തിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. എല്ലാവിധത്തിലുള്ള കൃഷികളും, എന്തിനേറെ പറയണം, നമ്മളുടെ അടുക്കളയിലെ ഭക്ഷണ സാധനങ്ങൾ, അരി, ഗോതമ്പ്, പരിപ്പ് തുടങ്ങിയ ഭക്ഷണ സാധനങ്ങൾ പോലും നശിപ്പിക്കുന്ന നിലയിലാണ് ഇപ്പോൾ കുരങ്ങ് മാറിയിട്ടുള്ളത്. ടാർപോളിൻ കൊണ്ട് കുടിൽ കെട്ടി ജീവിക്കുന്നവർ ഏറെയാണ്. ഈ ആധുനിക ലോകത്തിരിക്കുന്ന എൻ്റെ ഈ വേദിയിലിരിക്കുന്ന നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ആർക്കെങ്കിലും 15 മിനിറ്റ് വൈദ്യുതി ഇല്ലാതെ ഇരിക്കാൻ പറ്റുമോ? 15 വർഷമായി വൈദ്യുതിയില്ലാതെ മെഴുകുതിരി വെളിച്ചത്തിൽ ജീവിക്കുന്ന വ്യക്തിയാണ് ഞാൻ. അതുപോലെ ഒത്തിരി കുടുംബങ്ങൾ അവിടെയുണ്ട്. എന്നാൽ പണ്ട് രാജകീയ ഭരണകാലത്ത് നീതി നടപ്പിലാക്കിയത് ദളിതർക്കും സമ്പന്നർക്കും ഒരുപോലെയാണ്. ഇന്ന് ഞങ്ങളുടെ നീതിമാൻ ബഹുമാനപ്പെട്ട കോടതിയാണ്. ഭാരതത്തിൻ്റെ തനതായ സനാതനധർമ്മ നീതിബോധത്തിൽ ഊന്നിയായിരുന്നു. രാജാക്കന്മാരുടെ കൊട്ടാരങ്ങളിൽ പോലും ദർബാർ ഹാളുകൾ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. അവിടെ എല്ലാവർക്കും ഒരുപോലെ നീതി നടപ്പിലാക്കിയിരുന്നു. ഭാരതത്തിൻ്റെ പുരാതന നീതിബോധം ഡോക്ടർ BR അംബേദ്കർ ഇന്ത്യൻ ഭരണഘടന ഉണ്ടാക്കിയപ്പോൾ തുടർന്നു വന്നിരുന്നു. മൗലിക അവകാശങ്ങൾക്ക് ഊന്നൽ നൽകിയും മൗലിക അവകാശ ലംഘനം നടന്നാൽ പരമോന്നത നീതിപീഠത്തെ പൗരന് നേരിട്ട് പരാതി സമർപ്പിക്കാനും ഇന്ത്യൻ ഭരണഘടന വിഭാവനം ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ട്. ഞങ്ങളുടെ മൗലിക അവകാശങ്ങൾക്ക് ലംഘനം വന്നപ്പോൾ പൊതു താൽപ്പര്യ ഹർജിയിലൂടെയാണ് കേരള ഹൈക്കോടതിയെ സമീപിച്ചത്. കോടതി നിർദ്ദേശിച്ചത് ടാസ്ക് ഫോഴ്സ് രൂപീകരിക്കാനാണ്. ഇന്നലെ ഉദ്ഘാടനത്തിൽ വികാസ് സാർ പറഞ്ഞതുപോലെ കോടതി ഞങ്ങളെ ഉയർത്തിക്കൊണ്ടുവരാനായിരുന്നു ശ്രമിച്ചത്. ആനുകൂല്യങ്ങൾ ഞങ്ങളിലേക്ക് നേരിട്ട് എത്തിക്കുകയായിരുന്നില്ല. ടാസ്ക് ഫോഴ്സിലൂടെ ജനങ്ങളിലേക്ക് ഇറങ്ങിച്ചെന്ന് പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ പഠിച്ച് കോടതിയെയും ജില്ലാ ഭരണകൂടത്തെയും അറിയിക്കാനാണ് കോടതി അറിയിച്ചത്. അതിൻ്റെ ഭാഗമായി 131 നിർദ്ദേശങ്ങൾ ജില്ലാ ഭരണകൂടത്തെ അറിയിക്കുകയും അതിൽ ഭൂരിഭാഗം അവർ അംഗീകരിക്കുകയും ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ട്. സാധാരണഗതിയിൽ കേരള ഹൈക്കോടതി ഒരു കേസ് കേൾക്കുന്നത് 2-3 മിനിറ്റ് മാത്രമാണ്. എന്നാൽ ഞങ്ങളുടെ കേസിന് മാത്രമായി എല്ലാ ബുധനാഴ്ചയും വൈകിട്ട് 3 മണി മുതൽ 2 മണിക്കൂർ സമയം മാറ്റിവെച്ചിരിക്കുന്നു. അതിനുവേണ്ടി പ്രത്യേക ബെഞ്ച് രൂപീകരിക്കുകയും ചെയ്തു. ഇതുകൂടാതെ പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ നേരിട്ട് പഠിക്കുന്നതിന് വേണ്ടി ആറളത്തേക്ക് വരികയും ഞങ്ങൾ കാണിച്ച വഴിയിലൂടെ ചെളിയും വെള്ളവും വകവയ്ക്കാതെ പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ നേരിട്ട് കണ്ട് മനസ്സിലാക്കുകയും ചെയ്തു. ആദിവാസി വിഭാഗത്തിൽപ്പെട്ട ഞങ്ങളെയും എതിർകക്ഷിയായ ജില്ലാ ഭരണകൂടത്തെയും ഒരേ നിലയിൽ തന്നെയാണ് കോടതി ഇപ്പോൾ കാണുന്നത്. കോടതി തന്നെ നേരിട്ട് പ്രശ്നബാധിത പ്രദേശങ്ങളിലെത്തി പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ പഠിക്കുന്നത് ഇന്ത്യൻ ജുഡീഷ്യറിയിൽ തന്നെ അപൂർവമാണ്. ടാസ്ക് ഫോഴ്സ് രൂപീകരിച്ചപ്പോൾ വ്യത്യസ്തരായ ജനങ്ങളെ ഒന്നിച്ചു കൊണ്ടുവരാൻ ഞങ്ങൾ സമീപിച്ചത് IIM കോഴിക്കോടിനെയാണ്. നേരിട്ട് സഹായം നൽകുന്നതിന് പകരം IIM കോടതിയുടെ വഴി തന്നെയാണ് തിരഞ്ഞെടുത്തത്. ഇതിൻ്റെ ഭാഗമായി IIM വർക്ക്ഷോപ്പ് നടത്താൻ ഞങ്ങളെ സഹായിക്കുകയും നിരവധി വർക്ക്ഷോപ്പുകൾ നടത്താൻ ഞങ്ങൾക്ക് സാധിക്കുകയും ചെയ്തു. ഏറ്റവും താഴേക്കിടയിലുള്ളവരുടെ ഉന്നമനവും സ്വന്തമായി അവകാശങ്ങൾ നേടിയെടുക്കാൻ അവരെ പരിശീലിപ്പിക്കുകയുമാണ് ഞങ്ങൾ വർക്ക്ഷോപ്പിലൂടെ ചെയ്തത്. ഇതിൽ ഏറ്റവും പ്രധാനം ഞങ്ങളെ കേൾക്കുക എന്നതായിരുന്നു. വർക്ക്ഷോപ്പിൽ ഞങ്ങൾ ഊന്നൽ നൽകിയത് ആശയങ്ങൾ അടിച്ചേൽപ്പിക്കുന്നതിനേക്കാൾ പങ്കെടുക്കുന്നവരുടെ ആശയം കേൾക്കുക എന്നുള്ളതായിരുന്നു. ടാസ്ക് ഫോഴ്സിൻ്റെ ഇടപെടലിലൂടെ PWD പോലും ശ്രദ്ധിക്കാത്ത ആനമതിലിൻ്റെ നിർമ്മാണ അപാകതകൾ ഞങ്ങൾ കണ്ടുപിടിച്ചു, കോടതിയെ കാണിച്ചു. ടാസ്ക് ഫോഴ്സിൻ്റെയും കോടതിയുടെയും ഇടപെടലിൻ്റെ ഭാഗമായി പ്രതിരോധ പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങൾക്കായി 1 കോടി രൂപയാണ് ആറളത്തിന് വേണ്ടി അനുവദിച്ചത്. കോടതിയുടെ ഇടപെടലിലൂടെ കാട്ടാനകളെ വനത്തിലേക്ക് തുരത്തുന്നത് കൃത്യമായി ഗജമുക്തി എന്ന പേരിൽ ഇപ്പോൾ നടക്കുന്നു. 6 വർഷത്തിലധികമായി 17 കോടി രൂപ മുടക്കി അത്യാധുനിക സംവിധാനങ്ങളോടുകൂടി പണി കഴിഞ്ഞ മോഡൽ റെസിഡൻഷ്യൽ സ്കൂൾ ഈ കഴിഞ്ഞയാഴ്ച തുറന്നു പ്രവർത്തനം ആരംഭിച്ചിരിക്കുന്നു. മുടങ്ങിക്കിടന്ന ആനമതിലിൻ്റെ പണി 2 ആഴ്ചകൾക്കകം തുടങ്ങും. അതുപോലെ കഴിഞ്ഞ സിറ്റിങ്ങിൽ കേരളത്തിന് മൊത്തം വന്യജീവി പ്രതിരോധത്തിനു വേണ്ടി 8 കോടി രൂപ ഉപയോഗിക്കാൻ കോടതി ഉത്തരവിട്ടു. ആറളത്തിൻ്റെ സുസ്ഥിരവും സമഗ്രവുമായ വികസന മാർഗങ്ങൾ ആരായുന്നതിന് വേണ്ടി കേരളത്തിലെ ഏറ്റവും ഉയർന്ന ഉദ്യോഗസ്ഥനായ ചീഫ് സെക്രട്ടറിയെ ഞങ്ങളുടെ കേസിൽ കോടതിയിൽ വിളിച്ചു. വികസനവും സുസ്ഥിര വികസനവും തമ്മിലുള്ള സന്തുലിതാവസ്ഥ നിലനിർത്തുന്നതിന് വേണ്ടി ഭാരതത്തിൻ്റെ കോടതി നിരന്തരം ഇടപെട്ടുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നു. താജ്മഹലിൻ്റെ ചുറ്റുമുള്ള മലിനീകരണ ഫാക്ടറികൾ അടച്ചുപൂട്ടുന്നത് നിർദ്ദേശിച്ചത് അതിനൊരു ഉദാഹരണമാണ്.
ഒരു മിനിറ്റും കൂടെ.
പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ ഇതുവരെ പൂർണ്ണമായി പരിഹരിക്കപ്പെട്ടിട്ടില്ല. സനാതനധർമ്മത്തിൻ്റെ ഭാഗമായ ക്ഷമ ഞങ്ങൾക്കുണ്ട്. പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ പരിഹരിക്കപ്പെടും എന്നും ഞങ്ങൾക്ക് ഉറപ്പുണ്ട്. സനാതനധർമ്മത്തിലൂന്നിയ നീതിബോധം ആധുനിക നീതിപീഠം തുടർന്നുകൊണ്ടു വരുന്നതാണെന്നും അതുവഴി താഴേക്കിടയിലുള്ള ജനങ്ങളുടെ സ്വമേധയാ ഉള്ള ഉന്നമനവുമാണ് ആറളത്തിൻ്റെ ഞങ്ങളുടെ പാഠം.
Thank you so much. Just for want of time, I'm just going to give a brief summary of what she tried to say. And I'm really sorry, a translation purna alla, and excuse me for that. So she was trying to explain how the community was brought to the Arlam region. And the region can be divided into 2 sects. And the land given to the landless tribal families in Kerala has been the stretch in the middle. So there is a forest, dense forest on either side. One side it's a farm managed by the TRDM. And the other side it's reserve forest. So they are saying, and she was trying to say that wild animals continuously try to cross or use the stretch of land as a crossing path. So they constantly travel between this in search of food and sometimes also migrating between 2 stretches of dense vegetation. The community is saying that the wild animals are actually, we are being stumbled over by the elephant every time we wake up. And she's also pointing out the glaring absence of basic facilities in Arlam, and that's where she was tearing up. And it's been 15 years that she's in Arlam, and even now she manages with a petrol lamp without electricity. So the resettlement program has happened. However, the basic amenities for the community did not follow through. This was actually aggravated by the repeated attacks from wild animals. Another major thing that she pointed out was crop loss. They're unable to farm anything. Whatever they plant, the monkeys or the elephants or wild boars, they come and take those. Another thing she also tried to point out is how a lot of landless families have decided to abandon the land given to them in there. So they were landless, they wanted to have land and cultivate. Because of the hostile environment, they were also forced to leave. And now she also mentioned about the Arlam task force, which was formed because the community decided to go to the judiciary using a public interest litigation, hoping that the judiciary would listen to their voice. So the judiciary intervened to form a task force, and the community was asked to form it, incorporating community members. So now she was also trying to explain whatever happened after the community task force was formed. And one thing I want to amplify was a workshop that she was trying to talk about. The workshop, instead of imposing ideas on how can you solve your problems, encouraged members and actively told the community members to listen to their traditional wisdom or experience living in Arlam to come up with their own solutions. So she wrapped up the talk by saying that she still has faith in judiciary, and judiciary has actually involved in a lot of similar cases. She was quoting the case in Yamuna. So she hopes, and she wrapped the conversation with the hope that the condition would change. She listed a lot of accomplishments that the task force could actually get from the judiciary in terms of monetary support to implement measures to curtail the incursion of wild animals into their farmlands and homes. So I hope I have done some job of translating, but I'm sorry, Shruti, that I could not do a live translation. And I think we have come to the tail end of the panel. I have no words to thank all of you who showed up here despite it being, intersecting with your lunch hours. And I have no words to thank all 4 of you for coming here today and giving us such varied responses to the question that and also problematizing this idea of what exactly is ecological Swaraj. So I'm closing the panel by hoping that Viksit Bharat when we envision should also bring in growth and environmental sustainability, and also emphasizing the role of environmental justice for that matter. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Satish and the esteemed panelists for such an insightful session. I request Professor Priya Nair to please come and felicitate our esteemed panelists. Mr. S. Gopi Krishna Warrior, Mr. Sridhar Radhakrishnan, Professor John Kurian, Miss Shruti P.K.,
I know we have gone over time, but if there are any questions from the audience, we can quickly take them. But otherwise, we totally understand. We don't want to hold you back from your lunch. But if there are any pressing questions, one or two maybe we can quickly take. Sorry.
Thank you very much for your sharings. Very, very inspiring. A quick question which I have seen in all the sharings that all of you are targeting what is the mainstream, and you're still passionate about doing that. So what keeps you going? Like Shruti, Miss Shruti, and all of you. I mean, I'm not pointing out any. I think that comes across as a common theme. But what keeps you going? I'm very curious to know this.
എൻ്റെ ആത്മവിശ്വാസം നമ്മുടെ നിയമം തന്നെയാണ്, കേരള ഹൈക്കോടതിയാണ്. പിന്നെ ഞങ്ങൾക്ക് വേണ്ടി ശബ്ദിക്കാൻ ആരെങ്കിലും ഇറങ്ങണം, ഞങ്ങളുടെ അവകാശങ്ങൾ നേടിയെടുക്കാൻ ഞങ്ങൾ തന്നെ ഇറങ്ങണം. അതാണ് എൻ്റെ ആത്മവിശ്വാസം.
Another attempt at, half-broken translation. Do you want to translate? Okay. So she's trying to say it's my confidence that's leading me, and of course the faith in judiciary. And for our people, we have to come forward and we have to fight. And she also referred earlier to the Constitution, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, and fundamental rights, the belief in fundamental rights, and how the court would hopefully intervene to ensure that the rights are met. Thank you.
Many times this has been asked to us, because interestingly, people say, ഇങ്ങേർക്ക് മലയാളത്തിൽ പറയാം, ഇങ്ങേർക്ക് വേറെന്തോ ഉദ്ദേശമുള്ളതുകൊണ്ടാണ് ഇതൊക്കെ ചെയ്യുന്നത്, കൈൻഡ് ഓഫ്, all these ആരോപണങ്ങളൊക്കെ കേട്ട്
some vested interest, that's why he's doing.
All these ആരോപണങ്ങളൊക്കെ കേട്ട് മതിയായിട്ടുണ്ട്. The only vested interest personally I have is that when something illogical, illegal, untoward, that would at the end of the day either hit on our ecology, economy, or the societal concerns. Like, for instance, a Silver Line K-rail train that I was in the forefront fighting, and we stopped it. It did not stop because I fought it or our community fought it. It stopped because it was illogical. It was badly designed. There was no technology in it. So some of this has to be talked about, exposed. Then what is my challenge in it? Frankly, I keep telling that, if I get something like this in the front of my table and I'm looking at it, and if it's wrong, I don't sleep that day. Till you really have to stand up and challenge it, and then the work starts. What is the larger question of all this ecological Swaraj? That also I'll say. Because it's not just about the sleep, it's also about ecological Swaraj. And what's the larger question of ecological Swaraj? I just wrote down something, I think conclusively I'll say that. Ecological Swaraj for me is an unfinished part of our freedom struggle. Believe it or not. And I'll tell you why. We achieved political independence, but we have lost our economic and ecological freedom. And also the social sometimes. Our farmers actually now depend on corporations for seeds. We were all self-sufficient. Our people actually depend on private companies and very exorbitant costs, etc., for power, for instance. Other things also, but for power. I'm talking about electricity. The state, in fact, depends on debt for its growth story. Everywhere. National, state, global. So real Swaraj is when communities regain the control over the conditions of their life, which is soil, seed, water, food, knowledge, future, resources, all of it. And that cannot happen in this kind of a paradigm. So the paradigm has to change at some point of time, and I call upon managers to help us do that, or help yourself do that. That's what probably keeps me going on it, till probably I get really old. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, just one line. I think what keeps me going today is the same thing which kept me going when I got into environment journalism when I was 23 years old. I think what keeps me going is a desire to understand. I mean, it's as simple as that. So, desire to understand. I mean, so it's the goal is not, motive is not to make you understand. The motive is for me to understand something. And if I understand properly, then I'm in a position to articulate that to you. And that's what the desire is.
Thank you.
Do you remember, Mahatma Gandhi, he said something that the true way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. Others means not people alone, but whatever it is. Yeah, it's a very interesting thing to say. And Jane Goodall recently, when she passed away, she had written about hope a lot. She was interviewed, and there's a beautiful book called Hope. And in that, in one of the sentences, somebody asks her, what is your message for the future? Yeah. And she said simple, ask yourself, what is it that is a question for you in your own mind? And then keep following that. So these are a couple of things that people have shown us ways forward. And so basically saying that don't become a cattle.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Thank you, sir. Professor Kurian.
Yes, very quickly. I did business management 52 years ago from also a reputed institution like this. But I left very quickly because I was confronted with a fisherman who asked me, why don't you come and help us? I dropped my corporate job and went, and like Gopi said, at the age of 22, and I've not looked back. Of course, I have then got into academia and so on and so forth, but still walk on two legs, one in the world of activism and the other in the world of academia. But what keeps you going is that you have seen the other side of this country. And I think many management, I say that as also one of you, we don't see the other side. And I would just request that we open our eyes and see the larger thoughts. So we should not call this globalizing Indian thought. The plural is important. There are so many thoughts in this country which are not being recognized, and part of the problem is really that. And having discovered a small part of that keeps me going.
With that profound thought, we close the session. Thank you, everybody, for patiently listening.